morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for our regularly scheduled Coffee with Karl. Today, we're going to change the name to Coffee with TRIDEC. This Zoom meeting's been long overdue. We're going to introduce all the members of our TRIDEC team this morning and have a conversation about what we do at TRIDEC, what our mission is, how that's changed in COVID, and what some of our plans and aspirations are as we come out of COVID. So welcome, everybody. I am going to go in no random order to my right on my screen and start off with Tiffany Burke, who is our executive administrator. Good morning, Tiffany.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Good morning.
It's okay. It's the Zoom world that we live in. And I do have to say those wonderful Tim McGraw songs that we entered in with were really in tribute to Tiffany. Tim McGraw is, I think, a fan of Tiffany, and Tiffany's also a fan of Tim McGraw. So, you know, tried to, good intro
and
there.
Tim and I both thank you.
Next up is Traci Zhao, our Director of Business Recruitment. Good morning, Traci. Traci runs all of our Coffee with Karls, and so we have to tell Traci thank you for putting Tim McGraw on, because it was tough doing country music, but thank you.
And thank you, C. Mark Smith, for being appreciative of this music. So,
so David Replog is our Vice President of Federal Programs. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
David Chavey-Reynaud is our Director of Business Recruitment. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Ashley Stubbs, our Director of Communications. Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
And last but not least, and completely just blowing doors on all of us with her cool background, is Warr, our Director of Finance. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning.
Yeah, you really do have the best background.
I love the background.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to upgrade my computer or get a green screen or something so I can get a cool background too.
And we should say that although David's background looks like it's a music recording studio that he used technology to put in there, it's his actual room. So
it's good clarification.
So we'll get kicked off like we usually do with our coffee mugs. And as I said before, if anyone wants to let me borrow a coffee mug and tell a story, I'd be happy to, but I'm kind of recycling ours. And for this morning's TRIDEC, I got my Washington Starbucks mug that has like scenes from Washington on it. And I just wanted to say that this morning, I'm thankful for our TRIDEC team that's here in Washington, moving from Idaho. It's just really good to be here in the state and with the TRIDEC team that we've got today, you know, for many, many aspects. So that's my coffee mug and story and everything else. We're going to go in reverse order this time. So we'll go to Laura first. Laura, do you have a coffee mug or coffee story or any type of beverage you might be drinking this morning?
Right. So, you know, I don't drink coffee, but I do like a bottle of Diet Coke. But I do have mugs. And so I brought this one in. This is special to me. It is a gift from the troop 1052 that was a Brownie troop that my daughter was in. She was with these girls for years up until junior high school, till junior level. So they all signed it. Thank you.
Cool.
And it was great. Yep, Girl Scouts was really fun.
That is awesome. Well, we've got the right order going because we'll go to Ashley next, and I think that Laura might actually have her mug.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay. Well, I'll start by saying that I really do have a mug with coffee here, and this is a state legislature mug that says sine die on it, which if you adjourn sine die, that's a big deal. It means you adjourned on time. So this is, but I had to settle for this mug because the one that Laura's holding up is my favorite mug and it has a cool story, but I left it on my desk in the office. So this mug I won in a competition in high school. I was a part of an AP English class that only had 6 students. And we read Canterbury Tales, which involves, it's set in like the 16th century, and all of these traveling bards, they do pilgrimages to different places, and then they tell stories. And so all 6 of my classmates, we did a pilgrimage around the high school campus. And so we went from like, you know, the football stadium and then to the softball fields. And each student had to regale the rest of the class with a story. And we had like our grape juice, and we had our crusty French bread, and we had our cheese. And then at the end of it, somebody was deemed the winner of the bards, and that's how I won that mug. And that is the only mug that I had through college. And yeah, I'm really proud of it.
Awesome. David Chavey, what do you got for a mug or a coffee story this morning?
Not nearly as cool of a story, but when I was 9 years old, went to the Mall of America, and I think this is the oldest mug that I have, I got a Lego mug. And so
Nice.
I was all about the Legos at the time. And what more, this Lego mug is one that I would never lose.
Oh, that's cool.
That's
Even
cool.
labeled it with my name.
That's cool. When you fill it up with coffee, does the coffee flow out between the bricks? Like, is it made out of Lego bricks or?
You know, that would have been cooler, but no, not quite.
That's awesome. David Replog, how about you? What do you got for a mug or coffee mug?
So as the TRIDEC team knows, Traci and I have a bit of a rivalry between the University of Washington, my alma mater, and Washington State University, where she went. And I've enjoyed watching all of the previous Coffee with Karls, where Karl, you share your Costco Coug history. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I only have one University of Washington coffee mug, but it's a pretty cool one. So I figured I'd better represent by an old school Husky football helmet coffee mug.
That is
That's
pretty
awesome.
cool.
Cool.
I love it.
Nice.
That is really cool.
You know, Tracy's just eyeing that video, just itching to turn you off right now.
She's got her finger on the trigger.
Every time I go to take a sip of my coffee, my video will all of a sudden just go away.
If you talk too long, she'll be like,
Okay, now to keep things even, Traci, do you have a mug you'd like to share?
Surprisingly, I have WSU, but this one's actually really cool because it's WSU Tri-Cities. So I love this. This one's my favorite mug to be able to drink coffee out of. So I am representing WSU Tri-Cities. So next week when Chancellor Haynes comes on board, everybody's going to be in WSU stuff. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. And Tiffany, how about you? What's your mug or coffee story this morning?
Well, besides Tim McGraw, I also love the St. Louis Cardinals. So I have a St. Louis Starbucks mug full of Starbucks coffee that my daughter was nice enough to go get for me this morning.
Oh, that's awesome. That's, it's funny. I've been to St. Louis, I've seen the arch, and I remember like before I got there, I just always assumed like the arch went across the river. Like, it was an actual gateway. And then when it was like parallel to the river, I'm kind of like, oh man, but it is a pretty wide river. It's kind of not easy to throw an arch up over the river. So,
I guess.
okay, well, let's go around and just, for our guest today, just talk a little bit about your job and what we would do in normal times, kind of like our job responsibilities and how that kind of fits our TRIDEC mission for economic development, economic growth in those areas. And let's mix it up a little bit. We'll start with David Chavey this time on business retention and expansion.
Yeah. So I've been the director of business retention and expansion for 2 years now at TRIDEC. And when I inherited the position, it looked very different. And so we've been going through a period of change. We used to do a regular trade show for, we've done trade shows for food and beverage, processors. We've done trade shows for manufacturers. And when I inherited the position, we decided to try and transition the program into a more traditional BRE program. So I go out and visit manufacturers, and really I kind of view my position a lot as matchmaking. And so sort of keeping a pulse on the manufacturing industry and the business industry in general, and understanding what are the needs of our existing local businesses. So I have a survey that I've completed. I've gone on tours of several of our local manufacturers and seen a lot of really, really cool businesses here. And usually afterwards we sit down and we talk, and I have a menu of partners that TRIDEC has, whether they're local nonprofits or at the state, or various programs to get either financing, export assistance, help with your supply chain. And we kind of talk about what the business's current needs are, and I see if there are ways that we can help facilitate meeting some of those needs. I also work closely with Traci, our Director of Business Recruitment, because if they're looking specifically for suppliers, or they're business to business and they're looking for customers, then that can play a role in our recruitment plan as well. Because, I mean, what better than to both recruit new business to the Tri-Cities and have that new business help support existing businesses. So that's a lot of the activities that I sort of used to do. Are you wanting us to talk about what we're doing now as well?
Let's just talk about in normal times. We'll start with that, and then we'll get into some of the COVID.
Normal
work that we've
times.
been doing. Let's go to David Replog next on federal programs and talk a little bit about your role, and then how it fits into TRIDEC's mission.
Sure. And before I get started, I should say, as I'm listening to my 4-year-old daughter outside the door to my office, that to warn the audience, there's a fair chance that she'll be joining us at some point in time. The TRIDEC team has seen her on many video conferences. She likes to come and say hi to people. So if you see some random 4-year-old girl crawling around on my lap, little bit of fair warning. But as far as what I do, TRIDEC, really its origins going back to 1963 as the Tri-Cities Nuclear Industrial Council, really was focused on federal advocacy. At that time, Hanford was one of the only games in town when it came to economic drivers for the region. And the founders of TRIDEC at the time really wanted to both advocate for the Hanford mission as well as economic diversification, other federal missions, and that sort of thing. And as TRIDEC evolved to TRIDEC, it became a traditional business, traditional economic development organization doing recruitment, retention, expansion. You've always also maintained that federal focus as well. And so I've had a couple of very big sets of shoes to fill. First with, or most recently with Gary Peterson, and before that with Sam Volpentest, who were the previous vice presidents for federal programs. And that mission of supporting the Hanford cleanup first production mission and then cleanup, as well as the National Laboratory, has really been a lot of what I focus on doing. We work very closely with great congressional partners in our congressional delegation, some folks at the state level as well, to really try to advocate for both the funding and the policies needed to grow the national lab and to clean up the Hanford site. And then I also spend a fair amount of time working both with Traci and David on energy-related business recruitment, retention, and expansion. TRIDEC stood up the Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative a little over 10 years ago, with a real focus on leveraging the capabilities that we have because of the national lab, as well as the really skilled workforce and the great educational programs that we have here, to really pursue both growth in our existing industries, as well as bringing in new companies that can hopefully do both generation, manufacturing, research and development in a number of different energy areas that we might talk about later. Oh, it looks like we have Karl a little frozen. Oh, there's back. I think.
Freeze? Oh, sorry. It sounded like you were freezing. I guess it was me. Yeah, I'm unstable. If you guys can hear me, let's go to Traci next, and Traci can talk about business recruitment, how it fits into, I think David Replog just gave a great, how we all connect, but Traci, you want to talk about business recruitment?
Yeah, thank you, David. You stole all my thunder for what I was going to say. So really, I work with our city, county, and port partners on recruitment efforts. And so we have key target industries that we go after. Our target industries really do a great job at leveraging what our current assets are. So we have energy, especially in the R&D nuclear, SMRs, that kind of thing. And then we have food processing. We're an agricultural mecca here. As many people in the farming industry can attest to, you can't grow the crops you can anywhere in the world that are grown here in the Tri-Cities. So we work really closely with our egg partners and making sure that we can do the food processing that's needed. For those that don't know, we are the frozen French fry capital of the world. So thank you, Lamb Weston, on that. So really we work on recruiting companies into the Tri-Cities area from outside of Washington State.
That was awesome. And I might just take a segue break here and talk about, since I've been here, obviously very new, 6 months now. I've had 6 months on the job, most of which has actually been on Zoom and on Teams meetings and not in person, which is kind of new to all of us. But, some of the things I've heard in the little time I've spent in the community with our partners is that, because of the roots that David talked about with TRIDEC and being able, focusing on the federal mission, sometimes people think that's all that TRIDEC does because that's where we started. But I think it's great to tell our story today and talk about all the things that we're doing about really fulfilling our mission, even going back to TRIDEC, which is diversifying the economy, realizing that, federal jobs, especially with cleanup related, aren't going to be there forever. We need to make sure that our economy is growing in a good way and that it's diversified and that's spread out. And those are some of the things that, as me being the new TRIDEC guy, are really important to us because, we've got to have that diversity of our industries so that our economy is strong. And as we, talk a little bit more about COVID here in the next few minutes after we round out the team, we'll talk about that because a strong economy is the one that recovers the fastest. So if you've got kind of all your eggs in one basket and you get hit because of an unseen recession, it's tougher to come out. So that was a really good overview. We'll move over to Ashley next and talk about the things that Ashley does as Director of Communications.
Yeah, and apologies in advance. I am listening. I am also just keeping things rolling on all of our live channels right now. So amazingly enough, my 1-year anniversary of joining TRIDEC is today. So in terms of what we do during normal times, I think that I'm still figuring it out. It was about half and half in terms of how long I was on board as a communications director pre-COVID and then in the age of COVID. So, I think in general, TRIDEC has, as Karl and David and Traci have all talked about, this long legacy of being a staple in the Tri-Cities, and they've had such a strong role in growing the economy. And, I think that my job is to communicate that to the Tri-Cities, and let folks know that we're there and try to clarify the role that we play. I get the sense that economics and the role of economic development, it's kind of abstract. Some other groups make a lot of sense. Exactly what role they play. They're there to help a specific group. And an economic development group is about bringing more folks to the Tri-Cities and, expanding opportunities for employment and workforce development. And, and I'm sure they're all going to get into that. But a lot of what I do is help the community understand that in unique ways.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Let's go to Laura next. And Laura, you wear many, many more hats than just Director of Finance, but can you talk a little bit about your role on TRIDEC and how you really keep us all together? And especially what we appreciate is you make sure we get paid, which is awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's when people ask what I do, I pretty much sum it up by saying that I push the money around. And I do accounts receivable, accounts payable. I work on the grants. I submit for those that try to track stuff, work on the contracts, I work on the budget, payroll, all that sort of stuff. So I also know how to answer the phones. I'm going to try to set up a new Wi-Fi router when we're done here in the office. So many hats, yeah.
Oh, that's great. And Laura, we were talking about, getting ready for this program today, yesterday, and I didn't realize that you've been here for 27 years, which is really, really
In
great.
October,
And maybe if we
yeah.
have time to tell us some anecdotes, let's say there was anybody that was a brother of a former president that came by the office or anything, you know, maybe dance for some
You
of
want
those
that right now? Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to
No?
build it up too much, but yeah,
Okay.
sure. Let's,
So-
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that was one of the coolest things was Richard Nixon's brother, and I think it was Edward Nixon, who lived in Washington, came to our office. And I tried to Google why it was, and I don't even remember what year it was, but when he walked in the door, it looked like Richard Nixon. It was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, it was neat. Same wavy hair and the profile and everything.
That's awesome. And again, I'll just take a segue and say that, you know, as TRIDEC, we're funded in many different ways, and many of those funding sources include contracts that Laura talked about a little bit. But, you know, about 40% of our budget comes from private investments from private companies here in the Tri-Cities and in Washington State. And then about the other 60% comes from different programs and grants and contracts that we have with cities, our counties, our ports, you know, kind of all of our local partners, but also State Department of Commerce. You know, we have some programs where we deal with surplus equipment from, you know, some of the cleanup work that goes on at Hanford that has been a source of funding. So there's all these multiple ways that we're funded. And, you know, Laura does a great job in keeping it all together and keeping us going. I'll also say to our audience, if you have a question, we'll use the question and answer box at the bottom. Or if you're on Facebook Live, you can ask us a question in the comment section and we'll get back to you unless we run out of time or have some more Tim McGraw songs or something. So speaking
Or
of
Tim McGraw.
we'll go to Tiffany and she can tell us a little bit about what she normally does, and then we'll talk about all the things that she's doing during COVID. Tiffany.
Well, I feel like normally what I did was kind of stay in the background and just make sure everything ran smooth. You know, I looked at my calendar from this time last year, and I was looking at making sure David got to Washington, D.C. and you know, things like that. So I think pre-COVID, it was just make everything run smooth. Sure, the meetings got scheduled. There was space for meetings, and then really, you shouldn't have known who I was because everything's fine.
That's a great way to put it. Well, and again, you know, Tiffany always keeps all of us organized, and you know, as we've all shifted to working from home and working remotely, you know, it's a different business environment that we're working in today. Let's shift into just talking a little bit about how each of our roles have changed and some of the things that we're focused on doing. And we'll start with Tiffany because, you know, Tiffany, through multiple grant programs, that is TRIDEC, we've been approached and asked to set up grant programs focused on small businesses, to give some state and federal funding to small businesses to help them hopefully sustain through this down period. But Tiffany, can you talk about some of the work that you've done for the Working Washington Commerce grants? And then, you know, and I think that that's really changed your role. So you talk about being behind the scenes, you should know who I am, but during this time, I think you've had very close contact with many, many businesses in the Tri-Cities. You want to talk about that just a little bit?
Well, yeah, and the first grant we did, the Working Washington small, we call it West Bank, that's just easier. Those all came in as PDFs. And so we obviously had to do something with them. And so, you know, I was literally reading every single application. And I think everybody on the team pretty much helped put stuff on the spreadsheet when we realized it was, you know, I couldn't do it. Even Karl, you know, the CEO was doing spreadsheets.
Tiffany,
So
you only got like 30 or 40 of those applications, right?
my gosh, 900?
I think it was like over 1,000 with the whole, for the West Bank.
Including the blank applications.
Right.
Yes, which, you know, at first I would send back to people and say, hey, I think you might have made a mistake, but then, it just got a little overwhelming. And then now we've transitioned into the CARES grants. And luckily we have a software program that Karl found. Traci has been phenomenal as far as designing and making sure everything is running good. And so those, I look at every one of them and mark it complete, then analyze it and shoot it back.
Well, I'll just say that, you know, the team has really come together and like worked out, you know, we saw issues with the first grant program that we did for commerce, and, you know, they had an application that was online at the commerce website. You had to download a PDF, fill it out. There were a lot of issues with the way people were able to fill it out because we did receive a lot of blank ones. And so, you know, there's a lot of follow-up. And so as we moved into the next phase, which we started with Benton County for these CARES grants, we said, hey, let's see if there's some software out there that we can find. And, you know, we did find that. We incorporated it into the Benton County program, and then also received some funding to pay for it from Franklin County. And, you know, Traci really stepped up to learn that software package and put stuff together. But Traci, you know, you've been really our program manager for the CARES grant process. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, about all the things that you're doing with that, and then maybe give a little plug for the CARES grants so we make sure we have another chance to get the message out and ask small businesses to apply for them?
Yeah, so I'm the project manager for the Benton County CARES program and the Franklin County CARES program. And West Richland, which will be launching on Monday. So if you're a West Richland business, make sure you check out TRIDEC's TRIDEC's website, www.tridec.org/WR-CARES, and apply for it. You know, it's been kind of an honor to be able to work with these businesses and provide them the funding that they need. I think everybody's struggling right now, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So to be able to provide just a small little portion to help them out has been really gratifying for that. Benton County CARES and Franklin County CARES, their application round ends on next Friday at 11:59. I really highly encourage you to apply if you're a business in either of those counties. Benton County has grants up to $100,000 if you have more than 100 employees, and then up to $50,000 for 20 plus employees, and then up to $15,000 for 1 to 20 employees. So I highly encourage you to apply. You know, we don't want to leave any money on the table. Benton County has $3.5 million to give out, and Franklin County has $3 million to give out. So that's a lot of businesses to be able to help out. So please apply. All information is on our website.
So tridec.org, and on the homepage you see some buttons you can click on that'll take you directly to those BC CARES and FC CARES grant application pages. And then coming Monday, we'll also have the West Richland one as well. And again, I'll just say that you know, TRIDEC's connection to these small businesses that have been applying for the grants from the state and federal funds has kind of been a new chapter for us. Historically, we wouldn't necessarily have as close a relationship as I think we're developing with these small businesses and learning more about them. You know, traditional economic development so many times is really focused on, you know, the recruitment part and the business recruitment, retention and expansion, you know, existing businesses. And that focus is usually on kind of base industries. And so many, I think, businesses have been really, really affected. And what we've all been touched by and try to empathize with are the businesses that still aren't able to be open because of COVID. You know, in all of our interactions with small businesses every day, we hear the stories and are really touched by them and do everything that we can to try to, you know, direct some funding to them as appropriate. We'll go to Laura next, because Laura, again, on the contract side, Laura with the commerce grants has actually been working on contracts with so many of the small businesses. And so I think, Laura, you've faxed, emailed, texted, probably called, and even met in person with so many small businesses through the project. You want to talk about that a little bit, and maybe just what you've learned with, what's going on out there?
Yeah, so so after we got all those applications in, and so this was the initial round of funding that Commerce was doing through the Strategic Reserve Funds, and it was called the Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant. And that was the one that Tiffany, that we had all those applications coming in and we had to hand enter them. And so after the winners were selected by the governor's office, then it comes back to me, and we have to enter into a contract with all of them. And then they have to submit an invoice to me with copies of all their reimbursement expenses. It has to be an itemized invoice. and then I submit it to Commerce, and then Commerce sends us the funding, and then we have to write a check. So we have had 76 winners total. So 55 were out of Benton County and 21 were out of Franklin County. And the total amount of that award is $545,000. And so those are all $10,000 grants or less. And so I've had the pleasure of talking with all of those businesses and working with them and trying to get the receipts in so that we could get them funding. And it's been really humbling to listen to their stories and the struggles or the successes as we're going through this time. And I'm really glad that TRIDEC is able to be here to handle all of that. I'm really glad that we're able to stay open, working from home, but being able to run this. I mean, if we had to close down too, I don't know what would have happened with that. So that's what I've been working on, and I will still be working on this for a couple more months, I think. So plus all the other stuff too didn't quite go away. So there's less bills to pay though. No travel. So
right. Just like Tiffany talked about, making sure David got to Washington, D.C. It's sort of like, okay, we don't have to worry about that, but then we've got these other things that we're focused on.
mm-hmm.
Well, I think Laura just really downplayed how much work she puts into West Bay. Because it's not just that they actually return everything and she sends it and magically there's a check. It's, oh, some of the rules have changed. No, I need this to say this and this to say this. And
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's complex. Like those applications they're so dense, and
Yeah.
you know, it's nobody's fault that they're struggling because we're learning it at the exact same time that you are. So
Yeah. And they've been really good too, because there's been times where, oh, these dates were not quite in the range. And even though you paid it in the right range, it was dated wrong. And so everyone's been really good to work with. If I have to go back to them and say, no, this isn't quite right, how about something else? And so, yeah, it is an enormous amount of work. So,
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, it's a good message to get out there as we've kind of evolved and changed and adapted. Even Department of Commerce has as well, right? So that first program, we call it the West Bay Working Washington Small Business Grants, came out of an existing state program called the Strategic Reserve Fund that Laura talked about. And because that's in Washington code, that program had to flow dollars through and have receipts and everything else to back it up as far as reimbursements, because that's the program that it was. With the Federal CARES Act funding that's flowed through Commerce directly to the counties, I think there's some more flexibility in that. And I think, you know, hopefully to kind of ease the burden on small business owners, because I think that's what we've really experienced is small business owners, especially if they haven't been able to open, just trying to understand all the different programs that they may qualify for, you know, from the grant programs that we're administering to the federal programs like payroll protection program or the EIDL grant loan process. There's so much information out there. I think it's really, really hard for a small business owner who might not even be open or is limited open and trying to, you know, keep a lot of balls in the air. So, you know, I think the TRIDEC team's done a great job in trying to emphasize with that and try to work it out with them, because ultimately that's what we're here for in good times, to grow our economy, and in times like these to try to support the economy that we've got. So, and talking about existing businesses, David Chavey, you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you've been working on with, you know, from the West Bay grants to, you know, during the COVID times with your role?
Yeah, a lot of it was covered. I was part of the team that was dealing with West Bay when it first came out, when we were discovering all of the things that we didn't want to happen with the BC and FC CARES. And so with all of the West Bay emails, I was often kind of the initial filter. So I would get it and I'd try and look at all of the applications and see whether or not they were blank, and then put them all into a file and then send them off to Tiffany. I also during that time just answered any questions about the grant in general and timeline, and there was definitely plenty to do there. Since then, I've been working with, I mean, really right now, I'm filling any roles that are necessary from other departments, supporting Ashley or Traci or Tiffany. Right now, we're gearing up to try and take the pulse of the business community in September and continue to form action plans with the various cities on how to continue to support our local businesses. I've talked to a lot of our local businesses, not just about the grants that are coming through TRIDEC, but other forms of support that are available, whether it's training, whether it's one of the other SBA loans, and kind of where they can get some support there. I have talked to a couple of entrepreneurs who have had ideas about new forms of PPP and have sat with a couple of different businesses on ideas. I'm not necessarily sure if I should talk about the specific products, but there are a few ideas in the works at a local level about innovative forms of PPP or PPE, excuse me, personal protective equipment. And there are some exciting things that are happening there right now, and we'll kind of see how that spans out. And just staying in touch with a lot of our local partners. I've had connections with Careers in Manufacturing and the Workforce Development Council, making sure that keeping up to speed on workforce training options. We have a lot of people here locally who were suddenly displaced or laid off due to the pandemic, and we had a significant population locally who did not necessarily have the computer skills necessary to telework, and making sure that we're aware of and supporting all of those workforce development programs, which I consider workforce development in the business retention, under the business retention umbrella. And so my weeks have been fairly diverse amongst all of those activities. And so.
No, I was just going to say that's a great point, David, that, you know, to help existing businesses grow, talent has been an issue. And with COVID, you know, as we come out of COVID, I think it's still going to be, you know, matching people with skills with jobs that are open I think you're right, is a huge part of things that we may not own that role, but to interface, you know, I think that's TRIDEC's role a lot of times in the community, is make those connections for those programs. That's a great point. Ashley, I think, you know, in your earlier description about your job with Director of Communications, you talked about some of those challenges with COVID and kind of evolving and, you know, being that central point, you know, to make sure that we're messaging in the right way and that we're communicating with all of our audiences that are out there. You want to add anything more on the COVID role that you're playing, since you already hit on it before?
Yeah, you know, I would say that now even more than ever, I think that we have, I'm really proud of the work that we've done to collaborate with other entities in the Tri-Cities. You know, I think when COVID first started to unfold, which I was looking at my calendar this morning, 151 days ago today was when Governor Inslee announced, I know, it's wild. You know, immediately TRIDEC started calling the Chamber of Commerce, Visit Tri-Cities, those are our two partners, and then other organizations in the Tri-Cities, and saying, you know, what are you doing? Let's not duplicate efforts. And one of the roles that TRIDEC has played since the mid-1980s, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, since you're the historian, we've pulled together what we call case management. And so it's economic partners from each of the cities, counties, and ports in the Tri-Cities region. And, you know, it's TRIDEC's job to be a unifying voice for the entire region. And by doing that, we facilitate those conversations and we bring those people to the table. And, you know, so in addition to working with different groups in the Tri-Cities, we also, you know, like did an emergency call out to our economic development partners. And, you know, and beyond that, other entities in the Tri-Cities that are just, you know, really important folks, the President Haynes from WSU Tri-Cities, or Chancellor Haynes, and then President Rebecca Woods from CBC. You know, we have invited them to our case management meetings, and, you know, those big forces that really drive workforce development and education that all feed into building a strong economy, you know, and said, what do you need? What challenges you're facing? Again, let's not duplicate efforts. And so TRIDEC has done our best to also work as a signal boost and, you know, just try to get resources out to the community, because it's less important for us, you know, who takes credit for it, and just that we're rebuilding the community together. And it took us a while to find our feet, you know, I think, like everybody.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, you know, just quickly, this is the first pandemic the whole world's had in like 100 years. So nobody's ever seen this before. And then I think, you know, like in modern times, I guess, that we live in, we expect that science has come so far that it just knows about everything. So if there's an infectious disease, we should know about it. But the fact that this is a novel virus, which I think is part of its name, I mean, it basically means it's a new virus. It's an example of, or maybe an analogy to like what we're all going through. Like, we're just learning from a scientific point of view. We're learning about the disease, how it infects people, how that changes from day to day. Sometimes the data changes, sometimes the information changes. I think that's a good analogy to like what we've done here at TRIDEC and what our partners have done as well, is that I think everybody's trying to be nimble and trying to be, you always want to be proactive, but I think in an emergency situation, you have to be reactive. And I think that's what the team's done a really good job at, you know, coming together in our roles. And so last but not least, David Replog, you want to talk a little bit about your role in COVID and VP. And I think, you know, maybe a good segue is the virtual congressional tour that you guys and the TRIDEC team pulled off yesterday, which I've already heard great things back from some of the constituencies. You know, people were really impressed by that. But
yeah, I think I'd first just start by echoing that as an organization, I think we've done made a very intentional effort, and I think we've done a pretty darn good job of being flexible and trying to be responsive to what the community's needs are as we kind of work our way through this uncharted territory. We've stood up a really great website that, you know, the intention is that it's the place where people can go just to get any and all information about business resources in this COVID world, and connections to a lot of the other organizations that are also maybe have resources that could be used. We stood up a PPE drive near the very beginning with our building partners, the Chamber and Visit Tri-Cities. And throughout the last 151 days, yeah, I think we've really tried to pivot to whatever the needs are, and with the goal of just helping to support existing businesses and keep our economy as strong as we possibly can. Specifically to me, as has been referenced, I haven't been traveling a whole lot over the last few months, been staying at home. But you know, we've had regular conversations with our local elected officials and city and county staff, again, over the last several months, as we're all kind of adjusting and addressing the needs as they arise. I gotta say, I've really been impressed by the leadership of our local elected officials and those senior staff from the cities and counties. You know, I think we've come together when you think back to mid-June, and our numbers were really high, our COVID numbers were really high, and the collective messaging effort to encourage people to wear masks and how those numbers have changed. You know, I think that speaks to the united messaging and leadership coming from all of the organizations and municipalities throughout our community. We work regularly with the Benton Franklin Health District on a variety of different issues. We've had multiple conversations with state leadership and state agencies, from Admiral Bono, who is the COVID czar, to folks from labor and industries and others, in addition to all the other conversations we regularly have with commerce on the various grant programs and economic programs. And then we've also looked at trying to find ways that we can support the ag industry and the food processing industry. When you look at the counties across the state that have maybe had some of the greatest challenges with COVID and COVID numbers, they're the ones that also have pretty high labor intensive agriculture industries as well as food processing. And there's just some nobody's fault. It's just kind of the unique challenges in the nature of the industry that create some unique challenges. And so we've been working to try to identify ways that we can support those industries. And then, we've been communicating a lot of the challenges and in some ways opportunities with our congressional offices. There's been several fairly significant federal bills that have been passed over the last few months, CARES Acts. And so we've been communicating regularly with the congressional offices about not just the traditional things we normally talk about, which would be, P&L and Hanford, but some of those other things as well. Been working with some of our partners here locally to identify what might be some potential opportunities if or when there is a economic recovery or a stimulus type of bill. As many folks will recall, during the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we got a pretty significant influx of funding and made a lot of great progress with Hanford cleanup, and it also supported some projects at P&L, and it really kind of sustained our economy here in the Tri-Cities in ways that allowed us to not see the kind of downturn that we saw elsewhere. And so been looking at identifying what those might be, if there is another one. One of the things that we really focused on, and we got some great support from our congressional delegation, Senator Cantwell, Congressman Newhouse, but especially Senator Murray, was to get a provision in the CARES bill that allows both Hanford and P&L employees who cannot report to work because of COVID to still get paid. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One, because it, again, helps to kind of sustain our economy, but also those kind of workers take a very long time to train and to get ready to do the work in a safe manner. And if you lose them, it ends up both setting back the Hanford cleanup mission, but also costing a lot of money on the back end trying to get new people on board who have that same capability. The other thing, it's not really COVID related, but during this shutdown, if you will, I've also taken on the role as executive director of Hanford Communities. Hanford Communities have been led by Pam Brown Larson, who served as their executive director for 25 years. She recently retired, and I've had the good fortune to be able to fill her big shoes as well, as executive director of Hanford Communities. And for folks who don't know, Hanford Communities is the organization that formally represents the local governments on Hanford related matters. And so been working on that as well. And then, as Karl kind of alluded to, with all the other things going on, we're still actively tracking the normal stuff that we actively track, whether it's the funding for the next federal fiscal year 21, other federal legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act that has a number of impacts on Hanford cleanup policy and other things. And then we did just over the last couple of days have our 22nd annual and first ever and hopefully last ever virtual congressional staff tour. Our partners at P&L and Hanford did a great job of working with us to transition so we could still do a congressional staff tour. Normally we have a good number of staff from across the state as well as Washington, D.C. come out and spend 2 or 3 days with us to get boots on the ground and see what's going on at the Hanford site and at the National Lab. Obviously, because of the circumstances these days, we couldn't do that, but we did do a couple days of shorter, but I think very informative congressional staff virtual tours yesterday and the day before. And then we're also, I didn't mention before, but the other kind of federal nexuses that we work on are things like the lower Snake River dams. And there's been actually a lot of activity over the last few months in that front. And we've been working very closely with our community partners here, as well as others, to continue to advocate for the importance of the Snake River dams to our region and to the Pacific Northwest more broadly, and also continue to work on our effort to transfer ownership of the Columbia River shoreline reconveyance from the Army Corps of Engineers back to the local governments.
That's great, David. You know, during these COVID times, I think we've all gone through it. We've all been, because we do so many things by Zoom or Microsoft Teams or other platforms that you can video conference and stuff. And I think everybody's experienced it, and it's, you know, it's become a bigger issue on broadband connectivity and, you know, broadband connectivity during COVID times you might have a great broadband connection during regular times, but with COVID and now here in the next couple of weeks, we'll be going back to school. And I think all of our bandwidth's, you know, affected. I've gone through 2 times where it pops up on my screen, like your bandwidth's unstable. And I think the first time, I think I've made this statement that I'm unstable. And our partner, Michael Novakovich, has already texted me like, okay, my takeaway from this coffee with Karl Dye is unstable.
Just more messaging I have to clean up, Karl. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
So good.
Well, I think it's a great example of like the challenges that we're doing. We just talked about how we're all changing in our roles and, you know, what we're trying to do in these times. But, you know, so many of us throughout the country and even the world that are working remotely, like these are new times for us. Like it's a new deal every day. And maybe for the last 8 minutes that we've got, you know, you guys have done a great job. And I just have to tell you that I'm really so blessed to be here in this role and working with all of you. You're a really good team. Everybody's doing a great job in this. And I really appreciate everybody's, you know, devotion to our community. I think that in economic development is a great example in all of our jobs. If you don't feel deeply about the community that you're in, it's really hard to put in these hours and to do these things that we're doing. And it really does make important, it makes a big difference for our community. And I'm not just saying that from my perspective, I get that feedback from us and those compliments for our team. So maybe instead of going through, like we've got a couple questions, we can work it in, but does any team member want to ask another team member a question? Or do we have, maybe we got one from the internet, but let's open it up for the team. Does anybody want to ask anybody else a question?
So I did get a question emailed to me, and it is from our former boss, and I'm just gonna make sure that he knows this.
Previous Karl.
Previous Karl.
Previous Karl.
As many people that know me know that I may or may not be accident prone, and some of our other staff members may or may not be accident prone, but Karl, we are safe. I've been accident free for the 151 days. So new Karl has not had to worry about my safety at all. So I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, the most accident prone person has been safe for 151 days.
That's really good. And kind of keying off of that in our prep work yesterday, I'll just ask David Chavey. David, who is the best boss?
Karl. Karl.
Nailed
anybody
it.
else have anything? We do have one from the audience about Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative. Dave Replog, you want to talk about what major initiatives are we working on with MCEI right now, or maybe the committee makeup, just kind of get in that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So MCEI, for folks who aren't familiar with it, has about 75 members from local governments, utilities, industry, and again, is really focused on just trying to grow our presence in the energy space, whether it's in research and development, or energy generation, manufacturing, supply chain. And every month we meet and kind of have a high-level conversation about different subjects. But we also have 3 subcommittees that are really more targeted and focused on more specific opportunities. And so those 3 subcommittees are transportation. When we look at kind of the state policy and the way that the state is moving towards carbon reduction with the Clean Energy Transformation Act and others, one of the areas where we feel like there's an opportunity is in reducing carbon emissions in transportation, because that's one of the things that's still kind of not addressed. And because of our nuclear and our hydropower, we don't really create a whole lot of carbon in our electrical generation. So looking at transportation there, looking at energy storage, primarily looking at grid scale, battery type energy storage, in large part because of the extraordinary leadership at the National Lab, and they are the energy storage lab for the Department of Energy, but also at looking at things like pump storage, hydropower projects, and things like that as well. And then the last one is nuclear energy and technology, and in that we're looking at there's a lot of effort to bring on the next generation of advanced reactors, whether they're small modular reactors, microreactors, or other types of advanced reactors. And because of our heritage and our expertise still today, We feel like we have a really good role to play in the development of those reactors, but also in the supply chain associated with them. And then on the fuel side, there's going to need to be a whole new generation of advanced fuels, and we have both the capabilities as well as we believe the facilities that could really help support those. And so those have been, as we get close to the end, I don't want to take too much more time, but those are kind of the high points of what we've been really working on. And the other thing I would just say quickly on the nuclear side is there's also been some signals from the federal government that there might be some real opportunities in space nuclear. The rover that was just sent to Mars was powered by a nuclear reactor that was developed by the Department of Energy. And when we look at space thermonuclear propulsion, space reactors, again, we feel like we might have an opportunity to contribute to that here in the Tri-Cities as well.
Perfect. Thanks, David. We did have another question that came in earlier. How is TRIDEC hoping to encourage new construction growth moving forward? So new construction, both in the public and private sectors. Does anybody want to jump in on this one?
I think you volunteered for that one, Karl.
Yeah.
I did, but I'm trying to open it up. I don't want to, and I do have to say that you guys are great. And I think Coffee with Karl has gotten so many compliments in the community. People all the time, even while we've been on this one, I've gotten an email, very complimentary, and really it's the team that put it together. I just have to say, like, when I drove across the border, I checked my humility at the border because Coffee with Karl wouldn't be my choice in the title, but it's worked out really, really well. But I did want to be open if anybody wanted to jump in on this, so I'm happy to take this one, Traci.
You go ahead, Karl.
Public and private sectors in new construction, some things that we've been at least partnering on with, I'll say, in the public sector to try to spur new construction. A couple of examples, because of CARES Act funding, there are federal economic development agency grants that we're supporting Port of Benton and City of Richland and some of the infrastructure extensions into what they call the 1341 property, which was formerly part of the Hanford site that came through TRIDEC because we are a CRA, and David Replog will remind me.
CRO.
Oh.
Yeah.
Community reuse organization.
There you go. Yeah. Full disclaimer: I am kind of new, still working on my acronyms. I CRO.
Karl, I think after you hit your 7 months, I don't know if you can quite say that your name
Yeah.
anymore.
I know, but I got like another couple weeks. So the federal process worked that it flowed through us, and then we, transacted it to the public facilities for that. But adding infrastructure to that area would be great. We get requests for information from State Department of Commerce, and then also directly. And a lot of times they want large acreage sites, like in the hundreds of acres for new development and stuff. And that's a great opportunity. Also, Port of Pasco and the Ryman Industrial Center, which is their next industrial growth. They have put forward both some CURB grants, which I'm not even trying to guess what CURB.
Nailed it.
CURB. Anybody want to go into CURB? CERB acronym.
Community.
Economic.
Something.
Redevelopment.
Redevelopment.
That's CDBG. That's CDBG.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Karl, I think that we're going to have an acronym Jeopardy later, just so you're aware.
It's the
all
Community
need it.
Economic Revitalization Board.
There it
Sorry.
is.
Yeah.
I think I'm
CURB.
having some bandwidth issues now. And
Okay, for Karl's sake, and I think that Karl and I are the only two on the TRIDEC team that didn't grow up in this area or weren't from this area for a long period of time. The Tri-Cities as a region has a lot of acronyms. There are so many acronyms here.
I just have to say I'm from Maryland. So
Oh,
there you go.
learn something every day. All right.
go O's.
Yeah.
See, that's. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Karl.
Well, I was just going to say for our next TRIDEC session, we can get into some of those other parts because we didn't even get a chance to talk where we're from and background and history and stuff. But, we are trying to encourage new construction growth. But I gave a couple of examples like in the public sector, but then, in the private sector, we've tried to partner with other organizations, including home building associations, anything that we can do to support their efforts to open up early, use proper PPE in the job site and get people back to work, because I think that's what we've seen is like the demand for real estate, whether it's residential or even definitely public construction, like new schools and government buildings hasn't slowed down. There's still a demand for that. So even during COVID times, we've got to make sure that construction's something that we're continuing to encourage. So, it is 10:01 and I think we're doing pretty good. And then I just kind of couldn't remember what CURB stand for. And I think the whole thing fell apart, at least from my perspective. So I just want to thank you guys again for, really, really helping me and making this transition, even with COVID, as smooth as it is. And we couldn't do the things that we do. And I think we did a good job of kind of going through that today without each other as a team. And then we all talked about our partners in the community from different business organizations that we partner with, cities, counties, ports, all of our government partners that we work with, Department of Commerce. So I think we gave a pretty good overview of TRIDEC. Does anybody have any closing remarks or song requests before we sign off for the day?
No, you don't get a song request. I
Oh, we
already
don't?
picked out the song.
Okay.
Oh man, I was gonna look for
Shut
my
it down.
list.
We're glad that you're here, Karl. We're grateful that you decided to join us. So, especially during this crazy time, you're a good leader.
And not bail on us.
Yeah.
I changed my mind. I think
I'm
going
out.
back to Idaho.
Heck this, back to Idaho. Yeah.
I don't think they'll take me. I'm too used to wearing a mask. They don't wear masks in Idaho, so I don't think they'll let me back in. Okay, well, thank you guys, and thanks for all the work that you do, and on behalf of the community, everybody's doing a good job, and we're going to keep up the work and doing everything that we can to support our small businesses and the community, and keep everybody safe in these COVID times, and make sure that we come back even stronger than we went into COVID. So,
Hey, Karl,
thanks. Yeah.
how can people support TRIDEC?
People can always support TRIDEC. Great idea, Ashley. Thank you.
Good job.
TRIDEC is a membership-driven organization. We talked about it before. About 40% of our funding currently comes from private investments. And, I'll just say that our members, who are very good members and very loyal, and we appreciate their investment in TRIDEC, are the ones that see the community vision that TRIDEC is really based on. Economic development and investment in TRIDEC is an investment in the future. And, from a business perspective, the investment in TRIDEC is going to pay back multiples over many years. And that's the way that we try to phrase that investment, that it's an investment in our future. Given a little overview here today on what we do and what we're focused on, but we're always looking for new members. We're always trying to grow the TRIDEC membership team and, kind of spread our word in the community, continue to do all the good work that we can. We can't do it without that investment. So thank you, Ashley, for that reminder. That was very appropriate. And with that being said, I thank everybody for tuning in today, and thanks everybody on the TRIDEC team for doing a good job. Have a great weekend, and we will see the TRIDEC people on Monday, and we'll see everybody else back here on Friday. Thank you.
Thanks, Karl.